Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mr. Fincham's Fireside Follow-Alongs. Today, we are going to be reading a new story called What the Boys Found. This is going to be located on your newsletter under Thursday, under ELA Questions and Tasks, and it says you can access the book here in yellow. So you're going to click that link, and the text should come on up. And as always, before we get into today's readings, there are some questions that go with it. So here are the questions. Here's number 1. The reading-writing task. Explain 2 things that the scientists knew about the people who lived during the time the artwork was made. So people made some artwork. Scientists know some things about them. What are those 2 things? Name 2 of those things. And the next one. Text-to-self connection. Do you see value in analyzing cave paintings from the past? Why or why not? So do you think that scientists, do you think that's something that they should be studying and analyzing? Why or why not? And the extension. How did 4 teenage boys discover the cave paintings? So how did the boys discover the cave paintings? There is also a YouTube video about cave paintings. That is also on your newsletter, ELA Questions and Tasks, under the extension. There's a little yellow link there for you to click. So, what the boys found. And we are going to be starting off on page 3. So, here is a little model of the cave. This is in France. Okay, here's the cave entrance. And this is just like a little outline of the cave. I think it's pronounced Lascaux Cave. Forgive me if I mispronounce some of these words in here, okay? All right, and we're going to start here. Discovery in the woods. Have you ever been out for a walk and stumbled over a mysterious hole? Did you hesitate, look down into the darkness, and wonder what was under there? Well, that's what happened to the 4 teenage boys near Lascaux Manor in southern France on a warm September day in 1940. So, September 1940, 4 teenage boys look down into a mysterious hole, and they get curious about what's down there. And then we're going to start right here. Marcel Ravida, 3 friends and a dog were exploring the woods around the town of Montignac when they discovered the hole. Several years before, a large pine tree had been struck by lightning and tumbled over, exposing a gaping entrance to what turned out to be one of history's most interesting treasures. So picture just your normal tree, standing straight up. It was hit by lightning, and it fell down horizontally, flat against the earth. And when it did that, the roots came up, and it exposed a giant hole. As the dog barked excitedly, Marcel and his friends dropped to their knees and peered into the hole. Without a light, it was impossible to make out what lay below. But they could tell that something hollow and thrilling was there. They had a feeling that the opening was something other than a burrow or a tunnel created by a mole or groundhog. The boys could barely contain their excitement. What had they found? Was this a cave or perhaps a long-buried tomb? They felt they had to follow their instincts and continue their exploration. They made plans to return with a light and some shovels. And here is a little drawing of the dog. And here's a picture that they found on the walls. What do you guys think that picture is? What's it look like? We're going to go on to the next page. So here is another little image of them, right? The root has exposed a hole, and they're looking down like, what is down there? So finally they leave, and they come back, and they have lights and shovels. So we're going to start right here with exploring the cave. A few days later, Marcel and his friends returned to the hole with a lantern. Digging quickly, they enlarged the hole, and one by one they slipped into it, fell onto a pile of rocks, and looked around. Their light was very dim, and it took several minutes to become accustomed to the darkness in this underground space. Next paragraph. They saw that another entrance, almost a doorway into a shadowy space beyond, was behind some rocks. They looked at each other, nodded and shrugged, then held the lantern higher and moved into a large, dark space. So these guys are pretty brave, going into an unknown hole like that, right? And we're going to start on this paragraph here. Here is a drawing of what the boys found in this cave. The boys continued to explore the cave together, going deeper and deeper into the ground until they encountered a deep, narrow passage too small for all of them to fit through. After talking it over, they decided that Marcel would go forward alone. He would take the lantern and enlarge the passageway, then return for the others. Next paragraph. Carrying the lantern, a shovel, and some rope, Marcel squeezed through the space, digging as he went. After a while, he lowered the rope and dropped down a shaft into a cavernous room below. Paragraph up top. Holding the lantern higher, he peered through the darkness at the walls surrounding him. The walls were covered with bas-relief images that are carved out from the surface, making the image raised from the surface. Paintings of animals. Marcel moved closer. Images of horses, cows, stags, and bison seemed to dance and gallop and swim across the walls of the cave. This paragraph here. Marcel could barely contain himself. He hurried out of the room and climbed up. As he made his way back to his friends, he noticed other pictures on the walls of the passageway. So here is what's known as the Great Hall of Bulls, the largest room in the Lascau's caves, and Stone Age paintings cover the wall. Let me try to zoom in here for you guys so you can get a better look. Imagine discovering that. Wow. All right. Now we're going to go to... Let's look at these pictures first. So here's picture number 1, and then notice how the caption here has a 1 by it. The Great Hall of the Bulls is named for the paintings of bulls, but horses and stags are more common in the cave. And then caption 2 right here, and then here's the picture number 2. A stag with antlers. Try to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it a little better. And caption 3 for picture 3, a horse. Stone Age paintings. All right. Now we are going to go to this paragraph up here. More questions, more exploration. By the next morning, the news of the boys' discovery had spread throughout the village. Villagers descended upon the cave and found other rooms filled with new and exciting carvings. Clearly, these works of art were very, very old, and before long, archaeologists came to the cave to study them. We're going to go to the next paragraph here. Archaeologists are scientists who study ancient cultures using the objects that people leave behind. The archaeologists look at the pictures very carefully, and the longer they looked, the more questions they asked. So initially, my first kind of question is, how did they get the color on there? This is Stone Age. This is before crayons, before pencils, before pens and markers. How did they get color on the walls like this to stay for presumably, thousands and thousands of years? I don't know. So here is what it looks like from the outside. There we go. The Lascaux cave entrance. See it right there? All right. We're going to go on to the next page here, page 13. Let's take a look at this picture first. The scene of the dead man shows a man, bison, bird, and spear with a rhinoceros fleeing to the left. Paragraph right here, page 13. Who painted these mysterious paintings, and how old were they? Why were they painted in underground caves? Why did the artist paint only large birds and animals such as horses and bulls, and ignore small creatures such as snakes and fish? How could such perfect art be created in such a dark space? There were tiny holes in the wall halfway up the high ceiling. Why? What purpose did they serve? So these are all the questions that the archaeologists are asking. It's kind of hard to draw things in pitch black, right? There must be some form of light. So did they use torches? I don't know, because it sounds like this was before lanterns were invented. So what did they use for light? Top paragraph here. The paintings were clearly very old, but how old? The archaeologists began by trying to figure out when the paintings were created. To do so, they tried several different methods. Here you go. Many scientists started by looking at the paintings themselves. They analyzed the dyes, paints, or other materials used to create colors. If the artists used charcoal, scientists might be able to date them using the radiocarbon method. Things that contain carbon can be dated by measuring how much the carbon has changed. But they found that these pictures could not be dated in this way. So here is a scientist. A scientist cleans a mammoth's tooth before dating it using the radiocarbon method. Mammoths appear in Lascau's artwork. So carbon dating. That is how they determine that the Earth is, millions of years old or hundreds of thousands of years old or whatever. I think that's a good thing to look up. How old is the Earth? So it's approximately 4.5 billion years old. And they get that from carbon dating. Another form of dating that you guys might have heard of is tree ring dating. You can find out how old a tree is by counting its rings, right? Here is, on the next page, a little picture. Tools like these might have been used in the artist by Lascaux. So they look like little arrowheads, right? And top paragraph here. The scientists had to lower their eyes to find the answers to their questions. On the ground, below the pictures, they found flint and bone fragments used to carve the pictures and pigments used to create colors. Like fossils, the materials were sealed in the layers on the ground. After a great deal of study, the scientists finally understood what the boys had found. The pictures on the wall had been created by Stone Age people who lived about 17,000 years earlier. So 17,000 years. It's an extremely long time for these to be preserved. Here's another picture. The back-to-back bison in the main gallery show how Lascau's artists tried to make their artwork three-dimensional. It's a pretty good rendering of some bison, if you ask me. And then, who painted the caves? Still, like other caves in the area, the Lascaux cave held many more secrets. Scientists wondered who these artists were, why they carved and painted pictures so far underground. Scientists in 1940 already knew a great deal about Stone Age people. Stone Age men were hunters who killed and ate large animals such as bison. They were also people who believed in the magical powers of their leader, the shaman. All right, we are going on to the next paragraph. Scientists wondered if the pictures on the walls of the Lascaux cave could possibly have been carved and painted by a shaman. Could this mystical leader have gone underground to try to communicate with spirits of people who had lived before? Could he have painted the pictures to ensure a successful hunt? Next paragraph. Or could the hunters themselves have created the pictures as a way to bring them luck on their hunt? In other nearby caves, scientists found small and large footprints. Does this mean that children helped the artists or came to visit the shaman with their parents? Here's another picture. Down below here, the stags appear to be swimming across the wall in the cave's main gallery. top paragraph on the right-hand side, page 18. One question really befuddled the scientists. How were the artists able to see? It was very dark deep inside the cave, and no one believed that Stone Age people used lightning that could be carried into the cave. Or, excuse me, lighting, not lightning. So they didn't think that they used lighting for some reason. So did the Stone Age people come first, and the people who did the paintings follow much later, after fire had been discovered? As with many questions that seemed to have no answers, this one was solved by accident. Someone found a piece of sandstone that was hollowed out on one side. Inside the hollowed out circle was some leftover carbon. When the carbon was analyzed and dated, scientists found traces of animal fat. And here is a picture of the tool. People in the Stone Age buried animal fat in the scoop of this early lamp to light the cave. So, fat can be lit on fire and it will burn. Some of you might have heard of something called like a grease fire. Grease is just kind of runoff of fat, and it's very flammable. So maybe that's what they used to see in the cave. Animal fat. Next page here. This is going to be page 19. The lighting mystery was solved. Stone Age artists lit their workspace by burning lamps filled with animal fat. But other questions remained. How did the artists manage to carve and paint the glorious pictures at the top of the painted gallery? The ceiling in the gallery is very high, or is very, very high, and really impossible to reach. Could these holes halfway up the wall hold the answer? And then on page 19 here, scientists estimated the size of the artists. They guessed how far the artists were from those high paintings. When they finished guessing, they deduced the answer. The holes were used for a temporary scaffold that the artists climbed and stood on as they painted. So this is what they were standing on to reach the high walls. All right, page 20. We're going to go to this paragraph here. What were the Stone Age artists like? How did they create color? What tools did they use? What were they thinking? Luckily, the artists left all kinds of clues behind on the ground below their masterpieces. Can you guess what tools they used to carve the stone walls inside the cave? Next paragraph here on page 20. The answer is, they used more than one kind of tool depending on the kind of rock they were carving. If the rock was very soft, they used a stick or a finger. If the rock was very hard, they carved a pointed or rounded stone tool to cut into the rock face. All right, up here. Other rock faces were impossible to carve at all and had to be painted. Most of the pictures are painted with red and black pigments made from minerals and metals found in Earth. This little caption here. Scientists understood why the colors of Lascaux's paintings remained on the rock walls for 17,000 years. Can you guess why the colors didn't fade? And you guys can find the answer to that on page 23. Here's another couple pictures, right? All right, and then we're going to go to page 22, Understanding the Cave Art. What else do the caves tell us? Do we know what the carvings and paintings mean? Next paragraph. One thing that the caves tell us is that men, women, and children have always drawn pictures and always will. Stone Age people did not live in these caves. They went down into the earth and created pictures that represented something in their lives. Whether they went there just to draw or to be near their ancestors who lived before or to seek help from their shaman, we may never know. But they still were creating art. So this is the only rhinoceros to appear in the Lascaux artwork, even though rhinos lived all over France during the Stone Age. And let's get an answer to that question that we read up above. Here's the answer, right here. The colors on the rock walls didn't fade because the pigments were created from minerals and were protected in the cave from rain, wind, snow, and sun. In the summertime, some of you guys might go out and do chalk artwork, right? If you guys come back a few weeks later, it's usually gone because of the wind and the rain and the sun. The cave paintings didn't have that problem, right? They were protected from those things. Last paragraph. When we look at paintings created 50 years ago or even today, can we understand what the artist was thinking? And do we really need to know? Or is it enough to look at a picture and say, wow, that's beautiful? And then here is your glossary for if you guys ran into a word that you weren't quite sure what it meant. It has the definitions down there for you. And before we sign off for the day, I'm going to reread the questions that go along with this reading of What the Boys Found. The first one. Explain 2 things that the scientists knew about the people who lived during the time the artwork was made. So there was 2 things that the scientists knew about these people. What were 2 of them? And the text-to-self connection question. Do you see value in analyzing cave paintings from the past? Why or why not? So that's an opinion question. And I don't want you guys just to tell me, yes, it's valuable, or no, it's not. Explain why. I want to know the why behind your thinking. And the last one. How did the 4 teenage boys discover the cave with paintings? You guys remember that from earlier in the story? How did they discover it? And there is going to be a YouTube video on the extra ELA videos section about cave paintings. And that is going to be it for today. Thank you guys for following along. See you next time.